Today, I'm going to be talking about how I quietly crossed $1 million in my bookkeeping business sometime in the year 2024. The cool thing about this is that I didn't really realize that this happened. I decided last week that I was going to dissect my bookkeeping P&L, mostly to do a little exercise of how things are really operating on that side of things. I want to start with reintroducing myself and a bit of my story, and then I'm going to dive into the P&L of the bookkeeping business and share the 5 things that I think it takes to get to this point, and then some of the highlights of this bookkeeping business and the steadiness and the continuity. So just to rewind a bit, and if you're interested in longer versions of this story, my bookkeeping business actually started in 2014. I have some numbers in front of me so we can go through this. And actually at the time in 2014, it was not a bookkeeping business. It was a little bit of tax on the side for people who were too small for the firm that I was working at. And so I was like, sure, yeah, let me do some returns. I do not do any tax returns anymore, including my own, but I am a licensed CPA. I got my license in 2013. So the next year after a tax season under my belt, friends and family were starting to do as they do and ask if you can do their taxes. And I was like, sure, before I decided to pivot. I did not have kids at this time. I was strictly working actually at the CPA firm. And then there were periods where I went back to corporate and I became a mom in 2016, again in 2017, and again in 2019. So I do want to highlight some of the life spikes and things behind the scenes. But in that first year when I established the LLC that is still the LLC that I run my bookkeeping business under, I made $3,375 that year. This was not a business in my mind. I was simply, setting things up the way that you should because I'm an accountant and a rule follower. So $3,000 in year one. Year two, I have $1,307 in 2015. So in 2015, I went back to my corporate job and I did quarterly bookkeeping for a gym. So that would be the few $100 that I made every quarter doing a few gyms books. Again, I didn't realize I had a business at this time. I was working a full-time job. 2016 entered and I became a mom and I maintained that client for that year. And I think I took on one more client. So my revenue in 2016 as my total side gig, not at all a business, but at this point it was bookkeeping, $4,000. What happened in 2016 is I had my son, and the long story is on episode 1 of the podcast. You can search profits and Prosecco, and I'll tell the long version. But long story short, the beginning of 2016, I was out of corporate and I was home and having my first baby. So that was what my focus was for that entire year. By December, I was thinking I might need to think about how I'm going to supplement my income and continue this. I had a little severance in addition to this $4,000 in 2016, but I was starting to feel like I would like a bit more and to contribute. I didn't actually ever foresee myself as being taken care of, if that makes sense. I did want to be a stay-at-home mom and I wanted to be present for my kids. And for the first time in my life in 2016, I was home, not working, not in school, and I had my son and I knew what that looked like. He was born in January, so it was the whole year I had home with him, and I knew I definitely didn't want to let that go. And by this point, I was already pregnant with my next. So just as I started to think how am I going to do this? I ended up getting a connection from the CPA firm that I worked at of a client that was their demands for regular attention were higher than the CPA firm felt like they could accommodate and reasonably charge. So they thought of me, they connected me, and in 2017, I had this large client, and I ended up going from 1 bookkeeping client to 4 small bookkeeping clients and the large client simply by knowing people and saying yes when they came to me. So 2017 was an accidental boom in my bookkeeping business. And in that year, I made $46,500. So we had a big spike. There were so many lessons learned that I would cover in greater detail and probably will in a coming series that will totally dissect these years. But to give you a high level, this was the accidental start of my bookkeeping business under the LLC that had existed for 3 years at this point. And the highlights of this year were that I made sure that I was bringing this client on as a client. I made sure to maintain and draw the line and continue to enforce the line that I was not an employee, but I was a independent contractor. Now I would just consider these clients, and I probably did use the word client, but this engagement felt a little bit different. So many lessons learned in this big client that I kept until the end of 2020. So I had them for 4 years, which is so interesting. And I didn't mean to be running a bookkeeping business. And in fact, in 2017, I welcomed my daughter midway through the year. So I was a mom of 2, and I had these 4 small clients. I would do their books in one sitting. I would sit down once a month and do the books for these 4 smaller clients. And then I was available as needed, which I made sure it was relatively streamlined. And I was getting paid a high hourly that I negotiated for that job because at the time I knew that I was selling my sleep. So it was a good gig, and I was able to start doing the things that I wanted to do and finding autonomy while preserving my stay-at-home motherhood. In these days, I did not have a babysitter. I didn't work while my kids were awake. I did it either in nap time, which was really hard to get in tandem with 2, or a lot of my work came between the hours of 9 p.m. and midnight, maybe 1 o'clock sometimes, if I'm honest, because I am a night owl. And of course, that was a little tricky. I was literally selling my sleep. But $46,000, when I'm going to be candid, I don't usually do this, but since we're talking numbers, I'm just going to be candid. My salary exiting corporate as a tax manager of a big corporation in Florida in 2015 was $82,500 base and a 15% bonus. So when you do the math on that, it comes just shy of $100,000. So to make 46 at home in the hours that my babies are sleeping was something that I was excited about, but it did not feel like something I could replicate. And it didn't feel like it was gonna last, if that makes sense. So I was enjoying it, but it didn't feel steady. And in these days, I was absolutely not focused on growth. I only said yes to the people who came to me. I did 0 marketing. My costs were so little, they probably didn't exist. And then in 2018, I made $61,600, which would be the same bookkeeping clients, the same small 4, and the same big client. And I think that I might have just made a little bit more with them that year. I don't think I'm missing anything. I did in 2018 decide I wanted to stay home for good, and I wanted to kind of get ahead of that. I didn't want to wait until my kids were grown enough to be in school to try to figure it out, because I didn't feel like I would have enough time. So I was brainstorming, how can I maintain this and stay home? And in 2018, I started to dabble with the idea that I could educate entrepreneurs on the things they needed to know about their numbers. So I was starting to enter like a course kind of an idea back before I knew what courses was, and I was starting to think of how I could make money online. This changed things for me in 2018 because I spent a lot of my time really, I would call it hyperfixating on the idea that I could make passive income. I definitely believed in it, but I was nowhere near there yet. And this $61,000 does not include any sales that I made from that. I did make some sales, but I spent more than I made. And I was just talking to my coach. I do have an episode on the podcast where I break this down, but the funny realization that I had through doing my books, because at this time I ran both businesses under the same umbrella, and I was more focused on the sales and the expenses of the business as a whole, and not exactly where that money was coming or going to. And then I sat down one night and I was like, let me see how things are going. It would have been near the end of 2018, because I was not yet pregnant with my 3rd, but I had a miscarriage that year. So I was definitely planning on having a 3rd and trying to figure it out. I dabbled for a while and I was getting a little bit annoyed with myself. I think I would have kept doing that if I hadn't been thinking about having another baby, but I started to get real with myself that my attention wasn't going to be able to be there. So I needed to decide where I was going to put it, and was I going to keep pursuing this idea? And so I sat down, I did my books, and I realized I don't have these exact figures in front of me. I wanted to have more figures here, but I realized that I spent $10,000 more than I made pursuing online business, like investing in courses and investing in software and going places, right? I think I went to I joined one program, and I think I went on one retreat, and that probably was included in that. I could break down those expenses, but I realized I spent $10,000. And remember, I was a stay-at-home mom of babies. That money, I'm very disciplined with where my money comes from. I was not in debt, and I was not getting that from anywhere else. Like my partner was not paying for this. It wasn't coming out of savings. It was all coming from the LLC. So I had to stop and look and think, how could I have done that without recognizing that it was that amount? And I realized it was the bookkeeping that was floating things. So in 2018, because I became so enthralled with that, because I still had very small kids, my kids would have been 2.5 and 1 at the time, I had started dabbling and getting help on these clients. So I had made my first hire. I think I had 2 people working for me at that time. One was doing the 4 smaller clients, and one was assisting with the bigger clients. She wasn't doing everything, but she was assisting with some tasks. So my time pulled back on the bookkeeping, and then my time went into coaching, and not really coaching, they were courses was the idea at that time. So my time went into courses and what I call the active pursuit of passive income. So my time went there, my money was going there, and the thing that was making that happen was the profit from my bookkeeping business. And I hadn't even realized it. So with that aha near the end of 2018 or beginning of 2019, after doing my books and seeing where the money was going and where my time was going, I suddenly realized that this passive income that I was pursuing was possible with bookkeeping if I restructured things and focused on growth. So I went all in. And in 2019, I decided to change my systems, meaning the way that I invoice and bill, and I don't think it was necessarily price with that, but the way that I invoice and bill and get paid, because prior to 2019, I was invoicing my clients once a month in PayPal invoicing, and I would sit down and bill, and then I would make sure that they paid, and I would follow up on that. It was such a waste of time, even on 4 small clients, but I was invoicing and chasing down payment. I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to get paid on auto pay. I'm going to enhance these systems. I'm going to go out and I'm going to market. And again, at this point, I was pregnant with number 3. I knew she was coming any day now. I set this goal for myself to sign 5 to 10 clients in a few months, which is actually a hairy, audacious goal, but I went right into marketing for that. And my bookkeeping business went from the 5 clients that I had to 18. I grew by 13 clients in a span of maybe 4 months while I was pregnant with number 3. My intention here was to hire another bookkeeper or 2. I believe I hired 2 very part-time bookkeepers. So now I was up to 4 part-time bookkeepers who had designated clients, who I found the clients, I onboarded them, I set up the system, I documented the system, I trained the system, I reviewed until I was comfortable. And then I was in a position where I remember the first month that I had a bookkeeper working on things, I was literally making blueberry muffins with my kids when I was getting text messages from my bookkeeper asking me clarifying questions that I was able to give her. So I was no longer in front of the computer. I was answering the questions and going, yes, this is the way that we can do it. My intention was to grow this, get it to a passive recurring profit, and chill, which is not what happened. Because the marketing efforts that I did, the way that I was serving my clients led to not only more client inquiries, like on a delayed effect, but also bookkeepers starting to follow me. So 2019 was the birth of my coaching business, where I was now helping bookkeepers, really accountants, start a bookkeeping business, because I realized that you were able to do this on your own terms, something simple, scalable, profitable. And in 2019, on just the bookkeeping, my revenue went to $108,900. So just about $109,000. Remember, I still had the big client, and a lot of these clients were signed mid-year. So part of what you have to think when you're signing bookkeeping clients is I would always annualize it. So if I had a new client at $300, I would think this is a $3,600 raise. So that wouldn't be the full picture of the growth that I had, but I did hit my first 100,000 in 2019, the first year that I actually intentionally signed a client, which is pretty cool, right? Then 2020 came, and my focus was on maintaining my clients that I had. I did sign a couple more when they came to me, which was not through active marketing, but through the ripple down effect of what I had done the year before. Perhaps referrals. I mean, I could look back at all of this, but I don't have that data in front of me. So perhaps referrals from existing clients, and perhaps people who I had spoken to or connected to the prior year, and they were just finally ready to sign then. So my bookkeeping revenue went from 108 which really 109,000 in 2019 to 151 in 2020. And that was with zero new marketing. It would be the stacked income from clients that I signed mid-year plus a couple more and that still new client. So starting in 2018, I'd have more than just the sales, I have the profit. So if we rewind to 2019, the first year of intentional growth, the profit was 82,000, which is very strong. That's like an 80% profit margin, which makes sense. I'm just going to calculate the profit. Makes sense for the way that I was running things at the time because it was so lean. I was really just bringing people in to do the repeatable process that I had done. And I think when things broke, I pretty much fixed it, right? So there is something to be said for that. And then in 2020, when I hit 151,000 in sales, my profit was 108,000. So this was the year. Well, actually, the year before, my profit was my base salary. By 2020, my profit exceeded my prior tax manager salary, including the bonus, and I was working very part-time in the bookkeeping business at this point. My babies were less than a year, up to 4 years. And the way that I would quantify it then was I was working less or only the hours I used to commute. I think that would be fair to say I might have worked 10 hours a week in the bookkeeping business then. I might have. I also might not have. And there might have been a week during the month where I was not working, especially then because I had fewer clients. I had about, I don't want to say this wrong and I'm not looking at the clients now, but if I had to make up a number, I think I was at 25 clients in that year. So we would get that done in the bulk in the beginning of the month. And we weren't really growing in this year. We were more serving. So the end of the month would really be like off. We were all kind of off, which was great. So I think that to say that I was working 10 hours a week on average in my bookkeeping business would be an overstatement, which is really cool because I surpassed it. The thing that I stopped paying attention to after 2020 is what I've been able to continue to do in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and now we're into 2025. I'm going to say, because I don't want to dissect all 5 of these years fully in the same way that I'm doing now. I'm going to save that for a future episode, but I will give you the sales and the profit to see what's happened. And then I'm going to break down a couple of things that changed in these years and what it takes to hit this. So that was my first year of 6 figures. In 2021, the sales were 143,000. So they went down by, let's do the math. I like to be exact here. They went down by 7,500. What happened in 2021 is I let go of that big client. I had been trying to get out of that for years. I could see the writing on the wall that if I didn't make that choice, at some point they would have made that choice for me because of the nature of their business, and I never wanted that rug pull. So I made the leap to free up my headspace, to get back my holidays. This was a client that they wouldn't need anything and then they would. And it was always that they needed something when I was trying to travel, when I was somebody's birthday, like one of my kids' birthdays or a holiday. And it just was the nature of the beast. They didn't even know it. It would just be really bad timing and they would need something. And I was frustrated that I didn't have the autonomy over my schedule like that. And I absolutely felt like I needed to deliver for them because they paid me higher than my hourly. So I felt like I was just on call and that's what I was getting paid for. So 2020, at the end of that year, I released a client that, I don't have these exact figures, but I would say it's about $50,000. It might have even been a little bit more that I let go of in that client. And in that year, my income only dipped $7,500 and my profit was higher by $2,000. So my sales were $143,000 and my profit was $110,000. In these years, we're looking at 75% profit, 71.5% profit, 77% profit. And what changed was not so much that I signed new clients, but that I upgraded existing clients into a CFO level service that I ran for a couple of years. This was something that increased my revenue by $39,000 in that year, almost fully made up for the other client. And then this year I had, well, I think probably 2020 also, but I had about 10 grand of digital product sales in these years too. So I was supplementing income with that CFO services, smaller bookkeeping clients, and the digital products for business owners. So that year stayed very consistent, but they were very different years. And that's the thing that I'm trying to extract here. They were very different years, but very steady. Then in 2022 and 2023 felt very much the same for me. You have to remember that we're only looking at the bookkeeping business right now. We are not dissecting coaching and we're not factoring it in. In 2020, I created Booked Out Bookkeeper, which is now Life by the Books, and a ton of my time and headspace went there. In 2021, I created Babs, Become a Bookkeeper, and a ton of my time went there. So I was in coaching mode and maintenance mode on my bookkeeping. My clientele barely changed from 2021 to 3. There's very little change in revenue and expense. So 2021 is the year that I lost the client and went down to 143. 2022, my sales were 160, and 2023, they were 156. The profit in 2022 was 116. So now we've had an actual uptick in profit by $2,000 when you let go of a $50,000 client. And the next year it was up another $6,000 in profit. That's probably, if I had to guess without, like, I don't have the full P&L in front of me here, but that is probably just like maybe some onboardings, like a couple of onboardings that I probably did. So they might have low expenses, high profit. Then in 2023, the income only changed by a few $1,000s. And I don't know, I think I actually revamped my website. And so I spent like $4,500 on that. I do have like real business expenses in here, which show things like, office supplies. Yeah, 2023, I like furnished my office. So I had like $4,700 worth of expenses there. And I had, my rent went up. And so my profit was like 100,000 even in that year. But there were other like choice expenses, right? I didn't have to get an office. I didn't have to furnish the office, but I did. And so you see a dip in that. My sanity definitely went up. I loved having that office in those years. And then in 2024, that's when I hit another real pivot. So for years, I would say 21, 22, and 23 were like hitting a dart on a dartboard. I really was able to go into what I call maintenance mode, into that like desired state of truly passive and part-time and simple and scalable, recurring clients, recurring team, recurring systems. We really just rinsed and repeated for essentially 3 years. And then in 2020, the end of 23, my youngest went off to preschool, and all of a sudden I had more time. And I just said this on a coaching call, but when you have more time, it's the universe hates a vacuum. It rushes to fill it. And so my calendar rushed and filled. And all of a sudden I was actually focused in my personal life on making more connections and meeting more people. And by doing that, you end up talking about what you do. And I actually made it a very conscious decision not to lead with what I do. And I think somehow that has a natural byproduct of increasing like an interest in that. And I started to have a lot of inquiries in that year, more than I could handle. And with my daughter, my youngest daughter, off to school full-time, inquiries I couldn't handle, I just was basically delivered a bookkeeper who was like, hey, I know you do bookkeeping. Is that something that, like, what do I need to do to be a bookkeeper, essentially? And her training wasn't in accounting or bookkeeping, but she had the schedule that I liked and was local. And I'm really doing a lean into wanting to hire locally. It simplifies things for tax purposes. And I wanted this next hire to be not somebody who maintained a system, but somebody who could handle helping me revamp systems like our reports, helping me put in better regular check figures so that every month we're kind of doing a year-end check figure so that we can go from 30 to 50 clients. There's a big change from 5 clients to 15. And then there's a big change from like probably 25. If you want to go beyond 25, you have to do some restructuring to your team, I think, and your systems and the way that you do things. And I needed somebody really strong, and she happened to ask me about it at the perfect timing. I put her through BABS, which is my program on the skills. And then I sat with her right here at my kitchen counter, and we did a lot of really in-depth training, and she is an incredible hire that I was able to really take the clients. I ended up like creeping up to 16 clients that I was doing by the end of 2023. And that was because my former lead bookkeeper, that's what I called her, she had like 15 clients. She was wanting to take a step back and homeschool her kids. And I was at a point, which a lot of people get to, where you are kind of bottlenecked on needing help, but not having the time to get help, or feeling overwhelmed by how do I post this? How do I hire? I've then got to train. It's risky. It's always a little bit scary, both financially and in what you send your clients into, because you want to retain your clients. That piece is key. It actually should be added to this list. Retention is huge in what you need to make this possible. But anyway, when I hired my now W-2 employee that works 30 hours a week, which is a huge hire for me, very different from like people who would pop in a day or two in the first half of the month and then be gone. This was a consistent, regular hire who was able to help me with onboardings and changing our reports and implementing better reviews. And she essentially cannibalized my team. That's what I call it. So like by the end of 2024, she was hired early in 2024. By the end of 2024, she was the only bookkeeper left. It's me and her. I do 5 clients right now, which will get transferred eventually. It was that same person decided she was no longer going to be doing it. And because I had put so much on my new hire, I still do those 5 clients. But outside of that, she does them all. And we are close to 50 now. I don't know the exact count, but we are close to 50 clients at this point. So we had a huge year of growth. And by 24, similar to 2019, a lot of these clients were signed mid-year. So by the end of 24, my sales had jumped 50 grand from 155 to 206,000, almost on the nose. And my profit went up by 20,000 with a big hire, working 30 hours a week, probably 20 to 25 in the earlier moments of that year, while we revamped systems to get ourselves able to grow. And then we went into signing clients. We signed like 8 clients last summer. We are consistently, steadily signing clients. And now looking at 2025 through August, or maybe somewhere through September, I'm looking at sales of 167,000 and the same profit as last year, almost to a T. Like within a $50 difference, the profit is 114,380 as we sit here with an entire third of the year to go. So I am here to talk about this to say a few things. One, this simple, scalable bookkeeping business that I talk about is not just something that I did once, that like I hit a peak and then that was it. I don't really talk about what goes on in my bookkeeping business too much. I talk about what it takes to run one and what's possible for you and what my clients do a lot. But I don't usually sit here and share numbers. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I think numbers are very relative and they're just a part of the story, and it really depends on what else you have going on. And it's not the measure that we should be using. Profit is important, of course, because profit allows us to do the things that we want to do, but it's not the standard in what's going on. And that's why my program for those with the skill is called Life by the Books, because the idea is not to be booked out and busy. It's not just to make money. It's to actually have a life that you want to live, and it's supported by your bookkeeping business. And that's why we have Life by the Books. What I strive to do in my coaching business, and what I would say I do, is I give the tools to help you do this. And the reason that I came in here was to storytell how things changed in years with one big client, then smaller clients, tiny contractors capped at not being able to take on new clients in capacity, to then putting in the time and resources to get the right hire in place and then be able to grow while maintaining profit. Because a lot of people think they need more sales, and so they need a bigger hire. And when they do that, the hire that they're paying surpasses the income they're bringing in, and their profits go down. And sometimes that's okay if your proportional time comes back in excess of that. Like, you should be thinking about your hourly rate and not always the dollars. So sometimes a dip in profit is not so bad if you free up so much time and if that goes into other areas. Like, things I can't even cover here, or I did allude to what was going on with coaching. I didn't talk about anything that was happening in my personal life or any of the other things that I've gotten into. Like, I'm heavily involved in Airbnbs. A lot of my time goes to Airbnbs these days. A lot of my time goes to the school volunteering, which contributes to why I paused my podcast for a few months. But what hasn't suffered is the bookkeeping. And actually what sustains hard moments and hard seasons for me, seasons that are hard personally and seasons that are hard where like I get distracted with like stuff like property issues and things like that, which I dealt with heavily this year. So frustrating, especially when you are used to being able to opt in and out. That's what I love about bookkeeping. The continuity, the predictability, the profitability, and the ability to also get frustrated and say, no, that client's going, that team member's going, if it comes to that. That's not something I do flippantly for either case, really. But you're able to say no, and if something is truly broken, you're able to easily walk away, which is not the same in a lot of different arenas. So I'm saying this because this is something that truly is part-time in my life, more part-time than it even was in the beginning, because I'm not the one in the day-to-day. I could quantify my hours. I would say it's definitely less than 10 hours a week on the bookkeeping these days. And yet you see 6 years of 6-figure profit. And when I went back, I'm like, wait, like when I'm looking at these sales in just the last 6 years, it's 983,000. If you go and you dip into 2019, which is the first year that I really meant to grow, we're at like 1.1. That's freaking phenomenal. And it's something that I didn't notice because I don't track the bookkeeping like that. It's almost like it really does do what it's supposed to do. And so you can hit cruise control. So I'm here to tell you that this is not a pipe dream. This is reality. And it has lasted through a lot of different market shifts, right? Like people talk about, maybe it's just me because I am like in the coaching sphere, but you talk about like this marketing thing doesn't work anymore. This industry is hurting. This is hard to do, blah, blah, blah. I am not seeing that with bookkeeping, which I find extremely reassuring. And looking at where we're going to close 2025 is awesome. So I have 5 things that I think you need in order to have this. One is the skill. The skill of bookkeeping is absolutely essential. If you do not know what you're doing in accounting, if you don't understand tax, and if you don't know how to work with modern data and get it into a system and give a good report in an efficient and accurate way that leaves little room for error, then you can't build a bookkeeping business. It's the number one most essential thing is the skill. If you are new here and you would like to learn the skill, whether you have no experience or you're all the way up to a CPA, but if I handed you a new client today using, Stripe and Clover and Square and whatever payroll, and they haven't filed taxes, would you know what to do? And would you trust that you could do it not only accurately, but efficiently? Because efficiency is how you have high profits, and accuracy is how you stay in business. So if you don't know those things, you need Babs. And that you can go to katiefarrow.com/become, and it will tell you all about the program. But it is an amazing place to go to learn the skills so that you can have the confidence and the competence to actually grow your business. The second is systems, sales systems, marketing systems, ways that people can find you and work with you, scheduling systems, billing systems, your reports, your documentation, those systems need to be there. Because if you don't have them, you're operating chaotically and you're going to bleed probably 2 to 3 to 5 times the amount of time that it takes you to do the job. And then intention is the third, and it is big. If you don't know why you're doing this, and if you are not super protective of your time and of your peace and of what you say yes to and making sure that you say no enough, you will allow everyone to create a lot of noise, and you will lose focus and you will get distracted, and it will throw off your entire rhythm, and you will not be able to do this. This takes discipline, and intention is discipline. It's knowing what you're doing and making sure that you are pursuing that at all times. It's intention / discipline. They go together. They may feel like they're two different things. They're not. And the fourth one that I have here is allowance. You have to actually allow yourself to have this business. And I think that is something that I somehow work myself through because it doesn't come so naturally, but I have to remind myself that this is okay. I take walks in my neighborhood. I have some reels. I posted something in my stories yesterday, Monday morning. It was 10 a.m. I was getting 9,000 steps before I came back and took a shower, and then I worked for a few hours. You have to allow yourself to do that. You have to trust that what you've done for the day is already enough. You have to trust that you can take what you would have done in 8 hours and do it in 3 if you get really clear on what you're doing and if you prioritize your life. So it's allowance is really big. You have the intention behind it, and then you actually allow yourself to do it, which takes discipline. It sounds backwards, but it takes discipline to allow yourself to live the life that you actually want to live without guilt, without excuses, and without like punishing yourself by working enough to earn some time off, or punishing yourself to the point where you don't allow yourself any time off because you're not yet at this ideal stage of your business enough to allow yourself to enjoy it. It is backwards. You won't get there. You have to create the space now and work towards it while creating that space. It's very important. And then adjustment is on here. It's something that I've never said before, but I can see this in my P&L with the restructuring and the refocus and the revamping of how I do things. You have to give yourself the ability to adjust your services, your clients, your pricing, your team, all of those things. It requires looking at this and always adjusting. And when you have like your eye on the target, it's easier to actually get it done, right? But you can't just keep doing the same thing. You're not always going to be in the same season. And so you have to take note of that, and then not just say like, I've got to keep doing this. This worked, or I'm stuck doing this. You're not. You can adjust and you can adapt. And then in years like 2020 and 2021, you see, and it's so cool that is okay. And I put retention because we do want to focus on retention so that we're not constantly chasing something new. I have a lot of my clients that have been with me for years, a lot that are there since 2019, a lot that are there since 2020, and then ones that have trickled in. And of course, some fall off for various reasons. It's always okay when it happens. But retention is key in actually keeping profitability and having a role for your team. So I wanted to share that and pull the curtain back. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm having fun having conversations, so it's okay for you to comment here. It's okay for you to send me a DM. I mentioned Babs as the program that teaches you the skill. If you don't have it or you don't trust your efficiency, that's a perfect first step. And if you don't have clients, so you have the skill, but you don't have clients, then Life by the Books is the next best place for you. You can go to katiefarrow.com/life and learn more there. What I wanted to do was show everyone at all levels what is possible, because no matter where you are, there is a starting point. And also, what's possible for me here is not the cap. That's the other thing. And I think this is a very vulnerable share because talking about money so candidly is awkward, but I also feel like I might give the impression that this is the limit, or that I think that this is all that's possible. And my time is heavily split between bookkeeping, coaching, Airbnbs, my 3 kids, and their school. So bookkeeping doesn't get my full attention. If I wasn't a mother and wasn't doing all of those other things and maybe had a little less ADHD, I could hone in a bit more on the bookkeeping, but I love where it is and I love the steadiness of it. And I think it's a really amazing, I'm just looking at it, like 6 years of 6 figures of profit. That is so rare. As a bookkeeper, I can tell you it's rare, especially for an operation this lean. I see a lot of businesses and they might bring in more impressive top line figures, even though I think these top line figures are pretty impressive, but what they're keeping is not that. It's not common to hit it. And for it to be so like just bullseye, 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 how targeted this is and how consistent. And I think there is such peace and consistency. So those are the resources I have for you. Thank you for hanging out with me. It was great to connect. Let me know if you have any questions.